it's really for like a ridiculously high baritone.
Okay.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah, seriously. Like, that's how I kind of look at my voice sometimes. I'm just a ridiculously high baritone. Yep. That's all I'm at now.
Also, me and Matt were able to get comfortable because of me from Colorado.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to actually see people here, so I'm actually really excited. Yeah, welcome in, everyone. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to people on my committee, as well as Dr. Lowe for being a part of this. Today, we're going to explore a little bit of repertoire and a little bit of how singing in the tenor voice kind of works with the lecture recital that I've been working on, which is training the tenor voice through the folk songs of Stephen Mark Cohn. So one thing that I hear most from voice teachers about training voices is how difficult it is to train the tenor voice. As much as all tenors like to think they are all special little flowers, the tenor voice can be an enigma to a lot of voice teachers, especially if they are not tenors themselves. I have been lucky enough to not only be a tenor and go through the many trials and tribulations associated with the tenor voice, but I've been trained by some incredible teachers that have learned how to navigate and concisely explain how the mechanism of the tenor voice works. One thing that all of my teachers have talked about, ad nauseum, is learning how to navigate the tenor passaggio. Famed pedagogue Richard Miller even says in his book, Training Tenor Voices, the tenor voice must be developed with a keen awareness of the passaggio, ensuring smooth transitions and maintaining a balanced phonation throughout the range. For the uninitiated, the Italian word passaggio, or passageway in English, is a section of the voice where the vocal tract naturally narrows and signifies a separation in the various registers or sections in the voice. It is sometimes referred to as the break in the voice, though I find that terminology to be problematic because it creates the idea in a student that there is something inherently wrong with that part of the voice. For many voice types, the passaggio can feel more like a nuisance or a small bump in the voice that needs to be smoothed out. But while a soprano will have a first and second passaggio consisting of only a few notes in their range, a tenor has what we call a zona di passaggio, a figurative brick of notes encompassing close to a fifth of their upper middle range that can be very, very difficult to sing through. For a developing and even professional level tenor, learning to navigate the passaggio is paramount. More than any other voice type, tenors not only have to travel through the passaggio, but sit in the notes of the passaggio for an extended period of time. And to understand how we approach this, it's important to know where that is in the tenor voice. The tenor's passaggio usually sits somewhere between E4 and A4 in their range. Every voice is a little different, and there can be a lot of variables, but normally we see some event happening around F natural, F sharp, G natural, and A flat 4 called the turn. It is a natural timbral change that every tenor voice experiences, and an untrained voice feels like where the voice gets too high. How we combat this is what most teachers would call covering, or a slight darkening of the voice to help navigate this turn. Now, as a tenor, I find that the idea of darkening the voice almost always leads to the same unfortunate outcome, which is tenors trying to sing and sound like baritones as they sing through the passaggio. As the tenor voice naturally needs to have a lightness in the mechanism, I prefer to think of it as a modification to a slightly taller, darker vowel, i.e. a bright ah switches to an ah, an e goes to an I, an u might have a little bit more in it, and to demonstrate this, I'm going to talk a little bit about this chart and kind of show you how that works in a tenor voice. So, I'm assuming you can all hear me still. So as we take a look at this graph right here, I tend to find that some of the things that are on there are a little misleading. I tend to find the line that says tenore leggero, where it says E4, is usually typically where we see our primo passaggio. It is the note in our range where it feels kind of like the doorway into this kind of brick of notes that we need to think about covering and changing a little bit how we approach the voice, right? But what happens is the more dramatic voice, more baritonal, sometimes that can be a little bit lower. But more often than not, in a typical lyric-sounding tenor, you're going to find some kind of break happening around E4. So what happens is when we are approaching that note, if I play an A major scale, right? If that E is at the top of the range, I really don't have to think about it as covering or thinking about it as I have to modify it just yet, because it's the last note that I need to sing. If I go, ah, as you hear it, it's nice and open. I don't have to think about changing it. However, if I were to think of that note as the middle of the phrase, say I'm in C major, right? That E4, that E natural 4 is now in the middle. And because I'm going up to F and G, I have to think about that vowel being a little bit modified. So on an ah vowel, instead of me going, ah, which I think Luciano Pavarotti put it best, is not a bad sound, but I suspect a strangle, right? I suspect this feeling is too much. It's too much muscle, right? So we get a taller, nobler sound when we change the vowel from ah to maybe an ah, like in law, or I saw my father. Luca, I'm your father is what I hope you use in lessons, right? We go, ah, creates a much more consistent sound and allows me to get to those notes without having to work so hard to make them come out. And the best part about it is, if we know that we're modifying there, I can then transition into the top of my voice, right? And I don't know if you can all hear it, but when I get to that G4, especially on an ah vowel, that's where the turn in my voice is on that vowel specifically, right? So if I'm even playing up to F, sounds pretty in line, even though I'm modifying just a little bit. But when I get to that G, do y'all hear that timbral difference, right? And it's just something that naturally when we're singing an aria, we're singing an art song, we don't notice it as much, but understanding it as a teacher is paramount, because when we hear that shift, we know, okay, if that turn is happening, that means that we are now turning into the top of the voice, and we have to adjust. And when we get to the top of the voice, we take away some of that weight, and we allow it to be a little bit lighter, feel a little bit more open, right? So we go something like, While the actual turn may not happen till G4, by starting this modification process around D or E4 and staying in this cover till about A or B flat 4, creates a consistent sound that is much easier to navigate for the singer. As well, because all voices are a little different and the turn can be different on each of the 5 vowels, a lot of experimenting goes into finding the optimal sound for each singer. Now, there's no one perfect way to approach the voice. I'm a big believer in that. But when in doubt, this is a great starting point when working with a new tenor. Personally, my voice, like I said, turns on a G4 for the ah vowel, but it turns as early as E4 on an oo vowel. So it can be very, very different. But by treating that part of my voice and the range consistently across all of the vowels, I've become a master of my passaggio and can sing in and out of it consistently. So, how do we train navigating the area of this voice? By methodically and purposefully guiding students and choosing good repertoire choices. Now, for our instrumentalist colleagues, there is a wealth of etudes, pedagogical pieces, and technical scale books to grow as a player. We have things like the Marchesi Vocal Exercise book and various treatises on singing by pedagogues like Manuel Garcia. We in the vocal world don't really have an equivalence to etudes specifically, at least not pieces that we think about as being both pedagogical and performative. The repertoire that has been slotted into that category for us is usually the large canon of art song available to singers. Now, the issue that comes with that is, one, the level of difficulty can vary wildly, and there is a lot of repertoire to sift through. It can be really hard to parse out what composers are right for what kind of singer. As well, every composer has a spectrum of weight and difficulty in their compositions. There are big, heavy Schubert pieces and really light and springy Wolf pieces, even though normally we associate the opposite with those two composers of Lieder. And second of all, some of the go-to pieces that we use for developing singers can, frankly, be kind of boring, if I'm being 100% honest. Things like the 24 Italian Arias book, the Schirmer anthologies for beginning art songs, and various standards in classical music are famous and have earned their place as good beginning pieces for new classical singers. Even for folk songs, books like the J. Althaus arrangements are overdone and sometimes just aren't very good. However, I think that every voice teacher can find creative and new ways to navigate teaching singers through repertoire, finding hidden gems that are not only fun to sing, but can be used to train the voice, make our students feel accomplished, and give our collaborative partners something interesting to play that teaches the importance of collaborative performance. Which brings me to composer Stephen Mark Cohn. Stephen Mark Cohn is a living composer based out of Cleveland, Ohio. He has been faculty member at the Cleveland Institute of Music since the late 1990s and has composed a myriad of different musical styles, including contemporary genres like film music, commercial jingles. He's actually really famous for these meditative background CDs, so if you're into meditation, he's also a great composer for that, if you wanted to take a look at those CDs. But he's also known for his more traditional classical genres like opera, some musical theater, chamber music, and most importantly, and what brings us to this lecture recital today, his folk song arrangements. Originally released in 3 separate volumes, Cohn has composed 15 folk song arrangements that, in my personal opinion, are some of the most delicately crafted and earnestly composed songs in this genre. Cohn has taken what is normally considered a simple genre and elevated the music by playing with key changes, cluster chords, and some truly, and I mean truly, devilish piano parts. While some of these folk song melodies are simple, the piano arrangements can vary from calm and serene to being Rachmaninoff-esque in terms of difficulty. Sorry, Dr. Lowe. Many great singers like Will Liverman, Benjamin Apple, and most famous for recording Cohn's entire catalog, Andrew Garland, have found the pristine beauty of performing Cohn's music. But one thing in common with all of those singers is that they are all baritones. And I find that in the medium and low keys for the singer, they feel like what they were designed to be, elevated folk song arrangements. However, in my study of these pieces in the high key, I found that these pieces can be used as excellent tools for training the tenor voice. By putting them up by about a third, they function in the voice quite differently for tenors specifically. The way that Cohn has composed these pieces, there's a natural progression of difficulty that becomes apparent when we see all 15 folk song arrangements together. Now, originally, Cohn's songs were released in 3 volumes. First, and most well known, is the first set containing arguably his most famous song, which is 10,000 Miles Away, followed by On the Other Shore, The Farmer's Cursed Wife, Wanderin', and Red Iron Ore. The second volume contains The Bachelor's Lay, Down, 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 The Old Woman's Courtship, The Ocean Burial, and California. And lastly, his final volume is The Gallows Tree, I'm a Stranger Here, The Drunken Old Fool, Poor Wayfaring Stranger, and Hell in Texas. As they are arranged, they make great, well-rounded sets for any recital, mixing different ranges, ethos, and vocal difficulty. However, in 2018, all 15 pieces were released in a compendium together. And when all 15 pieces were together, I noticed that when not arranged in their natural sets, the songs actually fit better together in terms of vocal skill needed to perform them than any other through theme that the original sets may or may not have had. I found that the songs can be split into 3 categories. Songs for the young or beginning tenor, songs for the intermediate level tenor, and songs for the advanced tenor. The criteria that I used to reorganize this was range, tessitura, musical difficulty, length of song, and subject matter. Now, as you can see, the largest group of songs falls into that early tenor section. A tenor early in their singing journey can be rather indistinguishable from a young lyric baritone. Think a high school level or maybe a freshman music major in terms of experience. Many times they can sing up to the beginning of the zona di passaggio and usually top out around maybe an F or G4. And truthfully, when a new young student works with a teacher, many times it is more about figuring out where their voice is currently and seeing how it will grow into itself. And if you're not sure about whether they are a tenor or a baritone, using Cohen's song arrangements is a great place to start. And while I would love to go over all 15 folk songs, singing all of them alone would take over an hour to sing. And some of the pieces tackle the same pedagogical issues or go over similar ranges, so I wanted to use the songs that best highlight each level of singing and how they progress. While you could just use Cohen's songs to teach a student, I'm sure that would be lovely, a good teacher knows that varied repertoire in all major languages, i.e. Italian, French, German, English, are important for a well-rounded classical singer. And while there's a wealth of British art song in English, I believe that it's in every American singer's best interest to promote living composers from the country that they come from. That folk song is as much a part of the American spirit as baseball, warm apple pie, and colonialism. But truthfully, I genuinely feel that having a student learn that there is a wonderful, contemporarily composed American classical music is important and will help them down the road for when they need, say, a 20th or 20th century art piece for a grad school audition, or just various other auditions that we all have as professional singers in our life. And the first piece in this easy set that I want to take a look at is a piece called Wanderin'. Wanderin' is one of my favorite pieces to give a young student. The song is in a smooth 12/8 time signature that stays consistent throughout the entire piece, both in vocal line and the piano. It has 3 strophic verses and a 4th modified strophic verse that introduces the student to the concept of some basic syncopation and a little bit of hemiola. The range goes from D3 to D4, which is not very high, but the tessitura of the piece sits at that higher D4 for most of the piece. Because it sits there, it lets you know as a teacher whether the person singing leans more towards being a tenor voice or maybe just a higher baritone. Even for a young tenor, D4 should feel pretty comfortable for a tenor to sing, whereas a baritone will start to feel a little tight, because normally a D4 is right around the beginning of that passaggio for them. And it can be a great way to understand how you should move forward with their training. The verses are nice, long phrases that can be used to help train breath control and vocal line, as well as every easy piece in this set, because of the elevated composition of the piano part, will sound like the piece is harder and more intricate, but the melody line is easy to grasp, giving the student a feeling of accomplishment to put it together. The piano has these deep, rich bass notes that cut throughout the continuous ostinato of the right hand, giving weight to the wanderer's journey in this song. And I think that this piece is a great starting point for any young singer to explore their voice. The next piece I want to highlight is The Ocean Burial. This beautiful piece is a natural progression from a piece like Wanderin'. It's about a sick young man who is going to pass away soon, and his last wish is to not be buried at sea. We can assume that he's probably a sailor on a boat and wants to make it back home to be buried with his family, but unfortunately, spoiler alert, he does not make it. So it's very sad. The piece has a slightly larger range going to an E4, but again, the tessitura sits closer to that D4, asking the singer to find a lightness and comfortability in that part of their range. So much of tenor training is finding that open-throated singing that all voice types need, but finding that light mechanism to keep the sound from getting too heavy. The piece uses some modal mixture, singing the first verse in major with a quick little dip into minor. The second verse is in minor, and then the third jumps back into a major key, with the last verse actually being a cappella, as the narrator laments the passing of the young man, having his body dropped into the murky depths below. This gives our young student a slightly harder musical challenge, not only by changing the mood of each verse, but asking them more to think about the different colors and dynamics in the voice. As well, this is a great piece to sing for a church job audition and gives students a chance to start making money with their voice, because that's why we go to college for singing, so that we can do this as a profession. The last piece I want to highlight from this section is The Farmer's Cursed Wife. Now, the other subcategory that you could arrange code pieces into is pretty pieces and funny pieces. And while it's always great to sing beautiful music, a more comedic piece can help a student with acting, breaking out of their shell, and finding different colors in the voice. This piece only goes up to an F-sharp 4 once, but it now sits closer to that E4 in tessitura, so we're starting to move up a little bit in terms of the tessitura of each piece. And it's a good piece to introduce how we get to the passaggio and how we need to start thinking about modifying the vowel without going too high. As well, this piece allows them to keep touching their primo passaggio point and learn how to navigate this early section of the passaggio by not asking a student to sit in it, but gently massage those notes. And if they do sing a little too heavy, it won't kill their voice, especially if they need to go up to like a G or an A and they're not ready to do so. It tells the story of the devil coming to steal a farmer's wife, and the wife was so ornery that she hacked and slashed her way back out of hell. You play various characters like the farmer, the devil himself, and a narrator that returns to this Andy Kaufman-esque sing high diddle-I, diddle-I-fi, diddle-I, diddle-I day, shadowing Kaufman's famous skit of "Here he comes to save the day," over and over and over again. It is very, very silly. But in that silliness, it gives a freedom to the student to try weird things. You know, how scary is their devil? Is he a malevolent force, or is he a sexy seducer? How ugly can you make the farmer sound? And is the narrator, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Is he on the devil's side, or whose side is he on? These are all character questions that give a young singer a chance to explore acting and have fun. You remember when singing was fun? Right? I say it to my students all the time, don't forget that singing is fun. Now, I briefly want to mention that even in this easy category is a spectrum of difficulty, right? There are other songs that help bridge that gap from beginning easy to more of an intermediate level. The Old Woman's Courtship, The Bachelor's Lay, and Drunken Old Fool start to touch more upper passaggio notes like G4. It's best to gradually explore rep that touches these notes first before trying to sustain them. If a tenor starts to sustain these notes a little too early, they run the risk of learning to muscle those notes out rather than learning to support that sound. And when they get to rep that goes above it, we'll have to relearn how to make those sounds come out healthily. I know this from personal experience. By learning to caress those notes first, they learn to use their breath and body support rather than just pushing to get the note out. Now, as we move up in difficulty, a good tenor teacher will have been slowly but surely working on technique and repertoire that starts to get the tenor to the upper part of the passaggio, i.e. F sharp, G, and A flat 4. If a teacher has gotten them to successfully sustain these notes, the next pair of pieces are great because they go up to these notes but don't overstay their welcome and travel back down to a more comfortable middle or bottom of the staff. This is a great way to find repertoire that makes the student really own and feel like a tenor. Challenging the voice without blowing out the voice with repertoire that might just be a little too hard for their collegiate level. The intermediate tenor is best to be thought of as maybe like a junior or senior level singer that has figured out some things but still has a lot of work technically speaking. The first piece in the intermediate level that I want to showcase is Cohen's most performed piece, 10,000 Miles Away. 10,000 Miles Away is 2 verses and a repeated chorus that starts in G-flat major and has a sudden key change into A-flat major for the second verse. The serene accompaniment creates this sense of a longing memory, similar to how a movie will have kind of like a wavy cloud to have a transition to a memory, which makes sense because he's also a film composer, so he kind of thinks it that way. The piece stays in a steady 6/8 throughout and tells the story of someone missing their lover far, far away. This piece is not only beautiful, but it's a great first piece to work on the upper passaggio. It sits more in the middle of the voice and then touches some upper passaggio notes and follows it by sustaining 2 big G flats and then 2 big A flats as the climaxes of the verses and choruses respectively. It requires solid breath control and can be a great piece for training and explaining the importance of legato line. How a good line can not only add to the beauty, but can also help with support. I genuinely believe it's one of the best American art songs written in the early part of the 21st century and holds its own against composers like Tom Chapulo, Lori Laitman, and Jake Heggie. Now, for any of my colleagues from Texas, Hell in Texas is an absolute must to add to your repertoire for tenors. To me, this is the elevated version of The Farmer's Cursed Wife. It's in 6/8 instead of 4/4, but deals with the devil, again, wants to build a new hell, so he asks the Lord for materials and ends up making the great state of Texas a worse place than the original hell. It's very tongue-in-cheek and very silly. But Cohen describes different parts of Texas as being dry, hot, unlivable, filled with scary and dangerous creatures, not unlike what Texas actually is sometimes. And again, asks the singer to be playful and portray God, the devil, and the narrator, and find different colors for each character. The difference is, this time we are touching many more Fs, F sharps, Gs, and a big ol' sustained A flat at the end of the piece. So not only are we finding character beats, but now we have to contend with being aware when we can lean more into the acting and when do we need to focus on singing technique to get through the song. It can be really easy to get too much into the comedy, but unlike Farmer's Cursed Wife, it's much less forgiving. If the technique is not given its due, this piece is very easy to have a mishap, or, God forbid, a big old voice crack. Once it's in the body, though, this is a great closer to any recital, especially if you're in Texas. They'll love it. So, two other pieces that I would consider intermediate are Red Iron Ore and The Gallows Tree. While vocally, they are actually not all that difficult, they bring other challenges that vastly make singing them a lot harder. Red Iron Ore only goes up to an F sharp, but you're not only asked to sing a lot of them, you're asked to sing multiple F sharps every single verse that comes by. The song is 6 to 8 minutes long. It is very long, and depending on tempo, of modified strophic verses that describe an unnecessary amount of various ships that sailed the Ohio River Valley in the mid-19th century. So really captivating stuff here. But it is a really beautiful piece, but it can be a Herculean feat trying to memorize every single boat and every single verse of this song. Good. Now, The Gallows Tree, by comparison, is a sustainable 3.5 minutes long and only goes to a G4 once. However, the harmony uses a lot of crunchy dissonances that can be difficult to sing against, and they get more and more dissonant as the song progresses. Now, caution should be taken with a piece like this because it deals with the narrator about to be hung from said gallows tree for not having money to pay their penalties. For many students, especially African American students, this could evoke negative feelings about Jim Crow era lynching, and unless a student was trying to do a lecture or a recital about that topic specifically, I would probably try to avoid this piece. It's really the only piece I personally wouldn't outright recommend giving to a student because of the subject matter. But musically, it is quite interesting, and as he gets closer and closer to being hung, the dissonance gets more and more and more and more. So, now, what most advanced or graduate level tenors are working on is a comfortability in the passaggio and how to travel through it for those big, exciting high notes that everyone pays to hear. The three pieces associated with this level are Poor Wayfaring Stranger, On the Other Shore, and California. Though I'm only singing the latter two, Poor Wayfaring Stranger is one of America's most well-known folk songs. If you don't know it, I am a poor wayfaring stranger, right? It has been arranged by composers like John Jacob Niles, Jay Althouse, various jazz musicians to varying success. Even Johnny Cash himself has a famous recording of it. Cohen's interpretation is by far one of the hardest versions I have ever seen. It is truly a show-off piece for any tenor, climaxing with a Nessun Dorma-esque high B natural at the end of it. And while beautiful, other than being flashy for competitions, I felt that the other two pieces are better used as pedagogical tools, hence why they are highlighted and that one is not, because it mostly just sits in the middle of the voice and then is like, hey, here's a B natural, go for it. To take a look at that first advanced piece, let's take a look at On the Other Shore. It is a beautiful piece about passing on to the afterlife. It is the only piece that Cohen arranged from an Appalachian spiritual and is a great piece for any church job audition. While the melody is rather simple, as spirituals can be without any traditional ornamentation, what makes it so difficult is the range of the melody. One issue that can happen with tenors is trying to take too much weight in the voice up to the top of the voice. The melody starts on D flat 4 and works its way down to D flat 3, a pretty low note for any tenor, and then immediately asks the tenor to then shoot up to the upper passaggio, singing a declamatory F4 into an A flat 4, only to pull back dynamically on the words "on the other shore." What will happen to a tenor who is still figuring things out technically is that they will get too heavy on the low D flat, and when they go for the top notes, it will often sound pushed, or again, will heinously crack. As well, each A-flat section is dynamically colored a little bit differently, with some being forte, some being pianissimo. So you have to be able to not only not bring all the weight from the bottom to the top of the voice, but you also have to color those phrases correctly. So you have to really think about how we're going to approach those notes beforehand. And if it weren't hard enough, Cohn decides to have the singer modulate up a half step, which now makes the high note an A natural, which is where the tenor voice starts its top. And because the way it's written, it's very easy to stack that high note. If you're not familiar with the term of stacking, stacking is when we anticipate high notes by taking in breaths when we haven't expelled all the carbon dioxide before taking that breath. I.e., you get nervous for a high note and you haven't used all the breath in your body, so you go, and now you've stacked air on top of itself. It creates a strangling feeling that causes, at best, forced-sounding notes, and at worst, the note will not even phonate. The piece is a great way to explore big, long phrases and getting up to high notes without stacking and putting too much weight into that sound. Now, the final piece I want to discuss is California. While not having the same range of high notes as the other two pieces of this category, it is the amalgamation of all the tough aspects of every other piece that's come before, but also adds the added pressure of walking the tightrope of the passaggio. The song is light in terms of subject matter, detailing the brotherhood and camaraderie of the California Gold Rush. However, vocally, it is brutally difficult and requires laser focus through the passaggio. There is a recurring text and theme on "There's plenty of gold, or so I'm told," that recapitulates notes in the passaggio in quick succession again and again and again and again and again and again. As well, it has 6 key changes, again, sorry, Dr. Lowe, so that the phrase is sung on an F sharp, an A flat, and then recapitulating an astounding 22 high G4s in 14 measures to finish the piece. It is incredibly easy to oversing and get fatigued if not approaching the passaggio-busting passages with care. On top of that, it is a quicker piece that requires good acting than a slower B section that actually musically borrows a little bit from 10,000 Miles Away, kind of alluding back to that song, as if the journey was to go to California and that's why they're so far away, which I find so sweet. So it requires tools that each level before acid, breath control, line, acting, and navigating the passaggio with expertise. A piece like this, even for a master's level student, can be a huge challenge, and like Helen, Texas, is a great closer to any recital. Which brings us to the end of this lecture. I want to thank Dr. Bertram and my committee for a wonderful year. I think we've done a lot of really cool stuff together. And a special thanks to Dr. Palmer for coaching me through these pieces last semester, as well as a huge thank you to Dr. Lowe for all the hard work that we put into this recital. We're going to take a short break. I will be singing each of the highlighted pieces in order from easiest to most difficult to show the natural progression of using Cohn's folk songs to train the tenor voice. We'll take a 5-minute intermission. Thank you very much.
wreck of me, and it looks like I'm never gonna cease my ashes to ashes and dust to dust. If whiskey don't get you, then the woman must. And it looks like I'm never gonna cease my wandering. Oh, bury me not in the deep, deep sea. These words came low and mournfully from the pallid lips of a youth who lay in his small cabin bed at the close of day. Oh, bury me not in the deep, deep sea, where the billowy shroud will roll over me, where no light will break through the cold dark wave, and no sunbeam rest upon my grave. Oh, it matters not, I have oft been told, where the body may lie, where the heart grows cold. But grant, oh grant me this one final plea, to bury me not in the deep, deep sea. I have always hoped to be laid when I die in the old churchyard on the green hillside, by the bones of my father. Oh, let me be. Oh, bury me not in the deep, deep sea. Oh, bury me not. And his voice failed there, but they gave no heed to his dying prayer. There was an old man at the foot of the hill. If he ain't moved away, he's a living there still. Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. The devil he come to his house one day, said, "What are your family I'm gonna take away?" Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. Take her, my wife, with all your heart, and I hope by God you never part. Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. The devil he put her up on his back, and off to hell he went clickety-clack. Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. When he brought her down to the gates of hell, he says, "Punch up the fire, we'll scorch her well." Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. In come a little devil dragging a chain. She upped with the hatchet and split his brain. Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. In come a little devil climbing a wall, saying, "Take her back, Daddy. She'll murder us all." Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, 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 day. Now the old man was a-peeping out of a crack when he saw the old devil come dragging her back. Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. Now there's one advantage women have over men. They can all go to hell and come back again. Sing high, diddle-I, diddle-I, fly, diddle-I, 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 day. prison pen. So he asked the Lord if he had any sand left over from making this great land. Left over from making this land. The Lord said, why yes, I have plenty on hand. It's way down south in the Rio Grande. But I've gotta be honest, the stuff is so poor that I wouldn't use it for hell anymore. It won't do for hell anymore. So the devil went down to look over his truck. It came as a gift, so he figured he'd stuck. And when he examined it careful and well, he decided this place was too dry for hell. This place was too dry for his hell. Well, the Lord, he just wanted this stuff off his hands, so he promised the devil he'd water the land. He had some old water that wasn't no use, a rancid old bottle that stunk like the deuce. I tell you, it stunk like the deuce. Well, the Lord, he was crafty, the deal was arranged. He laughed to himself as the deed was exchanged, but the devil was ready to go with his plan to start up a hell, and so he began to make up his hell. He began. He scattered tarantulas over the roads, put thorns on the cactus and horns on the toads. He sprinkled the sand with millions of ants, so if you sat down you need soles on your pants. He put water poppies in all of the lakes, and under the rocks he put poisonous snakes. He mixed all the dust up with jiggers and fleas, put thorns and brambles all over the trees. The heat in the summer's 110, not bad for the devil, but way too hot for man. And after he'd fixed things so thorny and well, he said, well, I'll be damned if this don't beat hell. So he flapped up his wings and away he flew, and vanished from earth in a blaze of blue. So, if you ever end up in Texas, let me know if it's right. Spade and pick, we dig our chance, as big as a brick.